So everyone, welcome today to our latest Zoom and our Zoom series. We've got my friend Paula on today, and she is in Guatemala. And we are going to be talking about the ministry of Sueno Canasta. So I have to tell you, I'm trying to remember, Paula, how we met. I want to say
I remember the first time I talked to you, I think that was in an airport.
Yeah, wait. You know what? You reached out to me in direct messaging and you started messaging.
You. Yes,
Yeah, it's someone told you, a customer came in the store and said, you need to meet Paula. And then you reached out to me and you said, well, I'm in the airport, I'm in the US. And I'm like, do you have time for a phone call? And that's literally, you were running through the airport and we were talking on the phone. And I realized what an incredible partnership this would be, because I don't think you guys realize how difficult it is to find a partner that is in line with the marketplace. There's a lot of fair trade stores out there, but there's not a lot of fair trade organizations that are Christian based. And when I say that, it's not that, they're believers. It's that is an integral part of why they started, and it's why they do what they do. So that is why, even to this last week, someone reached out to me, wanted to send me a leather bag. And I'm like, do not send me a leather bag until we talk, because I don't want you to send me a bag and then we don't partner. We're not the right mix. So she contacted me and we were not the right fit. It didn't mean that they weren't doing great work. It just meant that there wasn't a ministry focus. And that's what got me excited when I met Paula, because Paula shared her heart. And Paula would say, I need help. But it was great to listen to how missionaries are stepping out into it. They're not business people, but they don't have to be business people. But it's great because then we get to do this exchange back and forth. So, Paula, how in the world did you ever settle on Guatemala, and how did all that come about?
Okay. Well, it's so nice to meet you guys. And I always love the opportunity to share what God has done, because when people come to our Canastas shop or come to the village that we're missionaries in, our ministry is bigger than Sueno Canastas. Our nonprofit is called Passion for Guatemala. But God has done all of this. And it's such an amazing, when she talked about, we're just, we are just trying to do what God is calling us to do. And we're just trusting Him to make it work. Because my husband and I are both operating room nurses. I am not a fashion person. I am not a creative person. I'm not a crafts person. I am none of those things. I am like an accounting person. I'm a numbers person. So I love how God has totally taken us out of our comfort zone, asked us to do what He's asked us to do, what I'm going to tell you about. But really, it's a story about what God can do through willing hearts, because it is Him that has done this. So in 2010, Chris and I came on a mission trip here to Guatemala. And it was more like a tour mission trip. We were coming to a place called Hope of Life International in Zacapa, Guatemala. And we came with a huge group and we got to go see a lot of different things. We saw poverty like we never imagined, and could not have really fathomed it. You see it on TV, but you can, when you're in the midst of it, it is just so overwhelming and powerful. And one of the things that we prayed before we came was, God, break our hearts for what breaks yours. And He certainly did that. And
don't ever pray that. Don't pray that prayer because
no,
you will get told to do something and you're like, not that. That's for Kelly.
Yeah. And the whole story is of what God has done. It's just really been all about never say never, because that is what God is going to do. But so we came here and God truly broke our hearts. Well, we came with another church. I was going to a women's Bible study at another huge church near our hometown. And we came with that church. God had planted Guatemala in my heart through a smaller church in my area. And I had told Mom for years, I'm going to go to Guatemala. I want to go with, and she was like, why don't you call them? Why don't you see, if you can go with them one time? But then a couple years later, God led me and my husband to go together, which is wonderful. Chris fell in love with Guatemala. The first day, the first week he was here, he told our leader that he was going to move here one day. And I said, no, you're not. And so we went back home and we went to our home church. It's a little country church in Appomattox, Virginia. And we told them all about what we had seen. And we felt God was leading us to build a house. So we planned to come back 6 months later. We were not going to wait a year. We came our first time in February and we came back in October. And God provided for us to build 2 houses and to send everyone 17 people with us. So Chris and I started leading the mission trips, and that was the first trip. While we were here, we knew that God was asking us to do a village transformation. And what that means is you would go into a village, you would build a church, you would provide a water source, and you would build a school. So we built a house in a village called Hope Alive Village. And I want to give you, and I hope I now see why God did not have me bring the artisan in, because I want you to understand our ministry. Because Chris and I are missionaries to a ministry called Hope Alive International. That is a ministry here in Guatemala. They have an orphanage, they have a school, they have an elderly home, they have a special needs home, and they also had a rescue village. And that rescue village was families who were brought in from the worst of circumstances. We had sex trafficking. We had a family who was rescued from sex trafficking. The family that we built the house for that year, his father was murdered and the family was in great danger. So Hope Alive heard about them. One of the little boys, Francisco, was malnourished. So they brought him to their children's hospital here and got him the medical care that he needed to get him back to health. And during that time, while they were here, we built their house, and then they moved into what was called Hope Alive Village. Well, that village is on the property of Hope Alive International, but they wanted a group to adopt that village and do a village transformation. And so when we built that house, we fell in love, of course, with the kids. It was just a small village at that time, probably about 16 houses. But Hope Alive had plans to continue to grow that village because there were so many families that needed help. So many families who were homeless, so many families who had sick children who needed medical care. We had a family that was rescued who's the son, and he actually works in our Canasta project. But he was an amputee and he always got all these sores and was just always sick from infections. And so his family was brought here. And because of that, and he received the medical care that he needs. And now he has a prosthesis and he works in our Canasta project and he's doing wonderful. So this is the village that we wanted to adopt. So we did. So what we did in that village for the next 5 years is we built the infrastructure. So we came in and we didn't have to do the water source because the water source was already there, but the houses were extremely small and they didn't really have kitchens or bathrooms. So what we did was we came in and built a church first. We did the vocational school. We did like a tutoring preschool. We also built a daycare because so many of the parents couldn't work because they had to take care of their kids or they were leaving their kids at home alone, which is not good. So we built a daycare. We built onto the houses, bathrooms, kitchens, and we built, we would do like fruit trees. We would, just anything that we could do to help them. They would like, of course, many impoverished villages, cook their food on open fires. But we were having people get sick, and had some people that had some lung problems. So we found a company, my husband found a company in Guatemala that had these stoves that had pipes that go up, through this roof. So we ended up buying them and getting them to deliver them to the village. And now Hope of Life, that's all they use in their homes now, to help the smoke not to just stay around in the villages and stuff. So we did all that through our church over the next 5 years.
And this is the small church.
This is the small church.
Yeah, the small church.
And I just want to tell you and I just want to tell you, and I hope I'm not going into too much detail, but this is just so important as we just seek God and what he wants us to do. But when we had to do the village transformation, it was $55,000. Okay. So we told Carlos that we knew this is what God was calling us to do, but we didn't know how fast we would do it. So we came home in October and we just started planning. We were going to have like spaghetti dinners, and we wanted to do golf tournament, and we were going to do whatever we could do to raise that money. But we told him, we hope to have enough to build the first, the church in June. So when we came back home, it was getting into spring. I think we had raised $6,000. I was inside cooking. My husband had just got home from work, and he came in and he opened up a letter and he went, "Oh my Lord." And I said, "Chris, what is it?" I was like, his face was so white. I was like, "What is it?" You're like, "You're scaring me." We got an anonymous donation from someone that we still do not know. We called him because he left his phone number, but he saw one of our flyers and what we were doing, and he wrote us a check for $50,000. I mean, Chris and I
but isn't it beautiful confirmation? It's this confirmation that sometimes you feel like you don't know what the heck you're doing, and you don't, and you keep going, and then God answers one prayer and puts someone in the path, and someone in the path, and someone in the path, and then even though you're still scared to death, that at least you're on the right path. So now you've got the money to do the whole transformation.
Absolutely. And it was that confirmation, that affirmation that we were doing exactly what God had called us to do. And that doesn't come all the time. But we were so grateful. And I always thought, I'm a thinker, and I always thought God must really have something big for us, because he's just showing us, keep going, keep believing, keep going, faith by faith. I'm there with you, And so he was just growing our faith so much. So we did all that. And so Chris and I would come twice a year with a group. And in 2013, we started coming twice a year without a group, because when we led a group, we really didn't have the time that we wanted to spend with the families. And we loved them so much. But we wanted to know them. So we would come by ourselves. So one day we were walking down the path of Hope of Life Village, and we were praying about what God had next for us. We walked up to one of our family's homes, and there was a little girl on the front porch. Her name is Veronica. And we walked in to talk to her to see how she was doing. All the other kids were in school, and we asked her, "Why aren't you in school?" And she said, "I graduated from the 6th grade last year." And she said, "My family cannot afford to send me to school anymore." And we were like, "Well, that doesn't make sense." We just figured it was free through the 12th grade, just like in the United States, So we talked to her about it. She brought us her grades. She had great grades. She had made all A's. She was so smart. And she said that she really wanted to go to school, but there was no way that she could do it. So we left there that day, and we told her, we said, "Veronica, we are going to figure out a way to get you into school." So we left, and Chris and I just kind of prayed about how we could do this. We needed to learn more. We talked to some of the people that worked at Hope of Life International. And what happens is, so the Guatemalan government has elementary schools in most areas, most villages. So it's free through the 6th grade, and it's free tuition wise. Now, if you can't afford uniforms, or you can't afford paper, or you can't afford to go get a copy from the local copy store, it's very hard for you to pass. It does cost some money. But these families had enough that they could do okay. And of course, the teachers knew if people couldn't afford certain, they have them print a lot of stuff. And so that was an issue. So we realized the issues with going to elementary school and the people being successful in that. But we also learned about higher education. So there are public schools in Guatemala that you can go to for a low price. But the problem is they can be far away. So you're talking transportation to go to school every day could cost you well over $600 a year. And these families cannot afford that. Even though the tuition is free, you have to get there. And so there's not buses, there's no bus routes, there's no free, anything like that. Well, Hope of Life International, the ministry that we were at, had a private elementary, Basico is what they called it, in Colegio. So we talked to Hope of Life, we talked to the founder, and we told him what we wanted to do. We asked him if we could start our own sponsorship program in the village and get our kids sponsored and use that money to give them education scholarships to go to school. And he loved it, loved it. He thought that is amazing. We felt like if we could get these kids educated, we could get them out of poverty. They could get jobs. They could have hope. It would open their eyes to what their talents and their God-given talents that God gave them, as well as open their eyes to the world. And one of the things that we see so much that it's so hard for us to understand is you're talking about kids that live in a little village who never leave. Like they never go anywhere because they can't. They don't have the money for a bus. They don't.
But they also don't know that there's opportunity.
No, they know nothing. They know what they learn in school. And at this time, they didn't have television. They didn't have smartphones. They didn't, they're so impoverished. They're just not open to the world around them. So not only do they not have dreams, but they don't even know what to dream, and it's so hard for us to even comprehend that. They live for today. They don't think about tomorrow. They don't think about next week. They don't plan for next year. They don't,
Well, because I think that the thing is, I was foolish one of the first time I went to Kenya and I walked through the slums, and I remember talking to one of my artisans and I said, well, what is your dream? And they looked at me like I had two heads, because you can't dream when you're trying to exist every day. No. All they can think about is what is the next meal. That's right. What is the next meal? What am I going to do? They can't even get out of today. And I'm asking them what they're thinking about down the road. And I just love that story, because by the end of my trip, as this artisan was hugging me, Sarah was hugging me, she whispered in my ear, one day I would love to have a wedding dress business. In that moment, she realized, you know what, there's more than what if you give me an opportunity, I can take it. So now the kids are going to school. So let's segue, because you said it beautifully, dream. They don't know how to dream. So let's hear how you started this income generating project.
Yes. So the next year we started with 4 kids going to school. And it was hard to get 4 kids to go to school, because the mindset was we do not care if our kids go to school. What good is education? They didn't, so our heart was to change the culture and the thinking that education is important. So the next year we started with 4 kids, and that grew over the years. So in 2017, in 2015, my husband was in a really bad car accident, and God used that to lead us here. And we were going through a difficult time. Chris was badly injured. He couldn't go back to work. He was on a lot of medications. Every month, we just didn't know what he was going to do. We didn't know if he would, be able to work another job, or, what would happen. We knew he probably wouldn't be able to go back to the operating room. So during that time, I was I knew that Chris loved Guatemala. I knew he wanted to move here. I knew this is where his heart was. I was very close to my family. I loved my job. I loved the Bible studies I was doing. I was so thankful for the life that I had, I didn't want to leave. And I remember going into my room one day and I was just broken for Chris, and my heart was just broken, and I was so angry. And I got on my hands and knees and I just started praying. And I said to the Lord, why are you keeping Chris from his best life? He's followed you his whole life. You know, I haven't. There was a time I was not following Christ. And so profoundly, God spoke to my heart, Paula, it's not me, it's you. And I knew then that I was keeping Chris from his best life here in Guatemala because I was refusing to follow God's leading for us to move here. So I prayed through that without even talking to Chris for about 6 months. And then I knew.
Because you were hoping God would change his mind.
Absolutely.
That's it.
I was. You're right. I was. But I had to know. I wasn't just going to come here on a whim. I wasn't just, I had to know. So in 2017, we finally moved here in January of 2017. We had been, in the years that we had been coming here, we had one of our friends, her name was Paula as well. She would come, and in the vocational school, she would teach the women how to sew. But of course, that was only a couple weeks every year. She would come twice a year with us, and she would teach them how to sew. So in 2017, when we moved here, we knew that we wanted to do something with that vocational school. We had several young girls who lived in the village who had gone to the first grade, and that was it. We had one girl who had come to us the year earlier, and she wanted to go to hair school. And so we told her, yes, we will help you. And we got her a ride. We got someone to go with her. We got her a ride to the hair school, but she had to have a 6th grade education, and she didn't have it. So we found out about these canastas, and we found someone who could teach the girls how to.
Why did you decide on the basket?
Okay. We talked to one of the leaders here at Hope of Life and told them what we were thinking about. And she said to us, have you ever heard of a canasta made out of recycled plastic material? And I said, no, I haven't. She said, these have been in Guatemala for decades. One of the ladies said that she had a plastic tote for over 30 years and still used it. And we loved it. And God just gave us the person that could set up for us to be able to go to where she lived. She was caring for a home in Antigua, and it was like a little coffee farm. So we took 3 of our girls there, and a teacher came on the weekend and taught them how to make these canastas on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And one of the things and the reason why we named it Sueno Canastas is we told them that we wanted them to dream. We wanted them, this work was for them to provide for their families, to be able to go back to school, but also to be able to accomplish the dreams that they have for their lives. So Marlene was one of the girls, and she was the one that wanted to go to hair school. So she was one of the ones that started in the project. So that is how we started the project. At first, it would take them a week to make that basket that you just showed. Now Marlene and them can make them in about 4 or 5 hours. But we started with 3 girls, and now we're up to 11. And it's really neat too, because we make clutches that has the zipper and the bag inside. And so 3 of the ladies that Paula Martin taught on her time when she would come to teach them how to sew, they are now working in this project and providing for their families. So, in 2017, Chris and I also started our own nonprofit called Passion for Guatemala, because our dream of education and our project, Sueno Canastas, had grown, and our church needed us to kind of go off on our own, get our own nonprofit. So we started our own nonprofit, and the proceeds from the Sueno Canastas goes to help kids be educated. Chris and I are missionaries here in Guatemala. We are not paid employees of Passion for Guatemala. We felt that would be a conflict of interest. So, our mission support comes directly from our church, not from our ministry. So we started the program. our nonprofit, because our education scholarship grew so much. We now have 43 kids who are receiving scholarships to go to middle and high school. We have 8 kids who are receiving scholarships to go to university. Veronica, she is in her 2nd year in university, and she wants to be a clinical psychologist. So that is where all the proceeds from Sueno Canastas goes. Marlene, who started with us, who wanted to be a hairdresser, had not been educated. Marlene just finished the 9th grade. She's 22 years old. She wants to continue to graduate from high school. And so that is their project. That is how it got started. We also have and God has been so incredibly faithful. I'll never forget one day. We were in the village, in the vocational school that we had built. And we had like 45 canastas. And, I was just praying, Lord, I don't know how to get rid of these. I mean, I don't know what we're going to do with these. I mean, groups were coming through because we're a part of Hope of Life International. Groups would come through, see the village, and we hadn't had a lot of groups at that time.
Because it's always the best sales when mission groups come through, because they want to take something home. But a lot of mission teams have dried up, especially, well, obviously when COVID hit, it was
this was before all that. This was probably in 2018 or maybe even in 2017. But then a friend of ours, actually the lady who led the first group that Chris and I came on, we've continued to be friends. She brought a group of 5 ladies who were from Pensacola, Florida, and they walked in. And we were talking and telling them about the project and introducing them to the artisans. And one of the ladies stood up and said, I want all of them. And I was like, God, you were so good. It's like every step of the way, he's just like, Paula, I've got this. Paula, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And so in 2020, Chris and I had to stay in the States for 7 months. We went home to visit. And while we were here, like a couple days after we got here, they closed the borders to Guatemala. And we could not go back for 7 months. We came back, and a month later, our village was totally destroyed. All the houses were destroyed. Our vocational school was destroyed. The church, the school.
It was what was it? Was it a hurricane?
It was 2 back-to-back hurricanes that totally washed out the village. One of our artisans, her whole house was washed away. I mean, there wasn't even a foundation. The whole thing was just washed away. I mean, we had like a 20-foot gully through the village where the water had made its own path. But anyway, so everything was destroyed. So the last couple years we have spent rebuilding. We were able to move the canasta shop to a small building at Hope of Life for them to work for a while until we found a donor. But now we have this beautiful canasta shop that it's 2 stories. We now have our own store. The girls work upstairs, and we have a room for Wilson, who does the leather. We have a room for the girls who sew, and we have a room for the girls who make the canastas. And then below we have our bodega warehouse, and then we also have our store. So God has rebuilt it better than we ever could imagine. And saying that and thinking about the Sueno Canastas, when we started coming to Guatemala, we claimed Ephesians 3:20. To him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all we could think or imagine, according to the power that works within us. And that is the verse that I hold to every single day. God has gone way far beyond anything that we could imagine. After COVID hit and we moved, there was no groups coming to Guatemala. I mean, even after the village was destroyed, there was no groups coming. We were still working, even through COVID. We still had the girls work a couple days a week because they needed money. They needed to survive. They needed to have food. And so we had all these canastas. We kept them working. And in that June, we had a designer from Connecticut contact us. And she buys our clutches, and her brand is called Squeeze de Citron. And she has been amazing. I mean, when she makes an order, the girls are so busy, they're making 2 or 3 times what they normally would during the week, which has really been a blessing to them, because they've been able to recoup and buy some of the things that they lost, in the hurricane and in the, when they lost everything in the village. We have rebuilt the village. We dedicated our last home. It's again on Hope of Life property. They all have new houses again. We have a school. They're finished. We're working on the church. We have a soccer court and a canasta shop. We had someone that donated to rebuild the canasta shop, but we were put into a grant from a company in Guatemala who was giving away $10,000 to a nonprofit. And so we put in our story about Sueno Canastas, and we won the grant over thousands of nonprofits. And there is a lot of worthy nonprofits in Guatemala. So that helped us to furnish everything. And so now we have 11 artisans working in the project. And it's been an amazing journey. And I want you guys to see them.
It's funny because I have tried probably on 2 different occasions to get to Guatemala, and always something just never seems to work out. Last time was, I think we talked about September, and it didn't work out. And in a way, I'm glad it didn't, because I had no idea that God was going to tell me to sell my house and move that month. So it wouldn't have worked out. But yeah, it's an amazing ministry. You guys are doing incredible things. I love how investing in an artisan isn't just about empowering them with a job. It's greater than that. It allows them to believe in themselves, and in believing in themselves, then a couple of them went back and got greater education. They felt they were worthy to get greater education. And that truly is what's going to change an entire community.
Passion for Guatemala has also provided a social worker and a tutor in the village. Because one of the things that we knew when we started sending kids to school was that we were going to have to provide everything they needed to be successful, because their parents could not invest. And in fact, in impoverished countries, most of the parents want their kids to work after they finish the 6th grade, even if it's for $1 a day. That can put some food on the table. So not only were their kids not going to be working, but they were going to have the expense of school. And we wanted them to be successful. So they have tutors. We have a computer lab. We have a social worker that helps with all the families. But a lot of the 1, 2, 3 of our artisans are mothers. And one of them is a teenager, but they can't read. So our tutor gives classes to them so that they can learn to read and write as well. So it's not just sending, we don't just send the ones that can go on the weekends to school. We're trying to educate the ones that can't go the weekends in school. And the one girl that's young and can't read or write, we can't get her to go to school. She was one that her dad promised her to a sex trafficker to pay a debt when she was of age, when she was 16. And that's why her family was rescued and taken to Hope of Life as a safe haven for her. It took her 2 years to leave her home. And when we started this project, she was one of the ones that we had in mind. We wanted her to work in our project. We wanted her to go back to school. So we still can't get her to go back to school, but she is going to those classes, and we hope that as she learns to read and write and starts to gain her confidence, that she will eventually return to school. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4 of our artisans have returned to school and are getting their education, which we're super proud of.
But I think everyone needs to know that the process is a slow process. And I think that's when it's a slow process, it's a lasting process. Versus sometimes I think when churches, not just churches, when organizations jump in, they want to see quick results. There's no such thing as anything quick. Whatever's quick, understand that when you take 2 steps forward, you're going to take one step back. It doesn't mean that it's a failure. It just means that it's a slow process to move the entire community
And,
forward.
our heart is to, change the community, change them. And we have seen that. I mean, these parents now, they are expecting their kids to go to school, and they are preparing for their kids to go to school. That mindset has changed tremendously. We never imagined that we would be sending kids to university, but we felt God opening that up for us last year and asking us to do that. And we had to raise more money last year than we ever thought. And, with the economy and everything, we thought, oh my goodness. Yeah. But again, God provided every cent, and he just continues. We have 8 that are in, and Veronica she was the one that started us with the university scholarships. I love her story because when we first talked to her that day, we asked her what her dream was, and she said she wanted to be an actress or a model, and she is very beautiful. But when she graduated from high school, she went into military reserves for 1 year. And after she got done with the military reserve, she came to, we talked to her throughout, but she came to us talking to us seriously about her dreams. And she said, Paula, I want to give back to women and children in their community. I want to give back to people just like people gave to me to get to where I am today. And that's when she told us she wanted to be a clinical psychologist. She wanted to help women and children of trauma. And she wanted to go to university. And so Chris and I prayed about it, and we told her, yes, let's try this. And she did fabulous. I mean, and she's so smart. And she says her teachers call on her all the time. They ask her questions all the time. The students come to her for help. And so God has just really opened her eyes to how smart she is, and the little girl that was sitting on the porch that had no hope now feels like she can do anything and she can be anything. And it's just,
and she can provide hope to other families. And that's what I love, is that it's always going back into their own community. I was in a slum in Kenya, and I was talking to some artisans, and they said, I came to Jesus because of her. And I half expected that I was going to turn around and it was going to be the missionary, and it wasn't. It was another artisan. Because what happened was, as that artisan was doing the work, she'd come home to her community, and she'd start telling people about Jesus and how her life has changed and all this. And that is what brings lasting change. It's always people within the community. So yeah, I think that's amazing.
In her first year, it's like she kind of led the way with university. And because of her first year and, what she told all her classmates and everything, the desire to continue and to go to university is there. Like that, like I said, we have 8 this year. We sent her, and 7 more started this year, and they're doing fabulous. I mean, and I'm going to tell you, when we first started this, talking to the management at Hope of Life, we didn't know. We were like, I don't know if they're going to be able to pass. They were like, we don't know if they're going to be able to pass. We don't know if they're going to be smart enough. They have blown everyone away, and it's just been amazing. And it breaks my heart to think that I could have been disobedient and not done it. I know God probably would have sent someone else to do it, but I'm so glad that we get to be a part.
Yeah, you would have missed it.
Exactly.
You would have, yeah, you're right. God would have sent someone else, but you would have missed being part of changing people's lives.
And I don't know what God has planned for us moving forward. I know that I would love to see us to be able to go into some of these other poor villages and provide scholarships and, to be able to help them to be educated. But I don't know what the future holds. But as far as Sueno Canastas, we just want to grow. Our dream is to have one person from every family working in the project. And we just want to continue to be able to grow and provide. And I love the opportunity to work with these families. We have seen God work so much through the difficult times. When I'm struggling, when I'm like, guys, we don't have, we're not having work right now. We don't have orders. We don't have, and I'm always like, we need to pray. We need to pray. We need to be praying for this project all the time. And then God will show up and do something. And they're all like, wow, God is so good, guys, and it's just been really, really great to see them go from faith to faith and watch God work through the project and work through them. So it's just been
Okay,
amazing.
so now I'm going to open the floor up to whoever has any questions for Paula. Paula, it always takes a while for everyone to jump in. It really does. We all just sit there and stare at each other for a little bit.
I know I've said a lot, and
I'll go first.
All right.
So what was the transition from the people in the village that didn't know like what was possible outside of their village? How did you, or whoever, how did they come to know what they could do or what their life could be? Is that something that they learned at school, or
Yes.
is it something that the ministry brought in?
No, it's definitely something that they learned at school. And, also too, as the families started to get jobs, and as the families started to be able to provide for themselves, of course they would get telephones and be able to get TV. Things like that are so much cheaper here. I mean, my telephone and internet is like $13 a month. I mean, So yeah, so it's very different. It's a lot cheaper here. Phones are cheaper here. So I think, school definitely is one of those things. We had preschool in the village, where they were read to, and, their eyes were just, we did, like we had children's church where we would show like Superbook, I think that, and just all of these things that they could take in and see, and visualize and see, I don't really know. I can't comprehend what it would be like to be just not be open to all that. So I can only imagine how their little brains were just absorbing all the new things. But I would think definitely school.
Well, just the ability to read. Once
yeah.
you start reading, now your world is open. You start hearing about different places, and now you start asking questions. And
and that's one of the things we have in our school was a library, because that is one of the things that we wanted them, to be able to do, to be able to read and have those opportunities to have their eyes open to the world. But it's hard to comprehend. It is very, very hard for us to comprehend that. And so thank you for your question, Catherine.
Wait, you're on mute.
Thank you. You were talking about building the houses and the church and the school and everything. You have the money, but are materials just readily available to do that kind of thing?
Okay, so this is also where like I talked about Passion for Guatemala, and you remember the beginning I talked about us being missionaries to Hope Alive International. So Hope Alive International also they have a lot of groups that come here. They have child sponsorship programs in many, many, many villages. They build houses in these villages. Groups pay to have families provided with homes. So that is Hope Alive International has built all the infrastructure.
Oh, okay.
Passion for Guatemala paid Hope Alive, granted Hope Alive the money for the Canastas shop, in different areas, but like a group from California provided our education center. So Passion for Guatemala works hand in hand with Hope Alive, but what Passion for Guatemala, what our plan was in starting our own nonprofit is walking alongside Hope Alive and providing things that they couldn't. Like Hope Alive does not provide scholarships for kids, so.
Okay.
So we kind of walk alongside them and just are able to expand their impact through our nonprofit. So.
But
So-
literally the materials to build the houses and everything, all of that is readily available?
Oh, yes,
The
yes.
literal,
There's-
local.
okay, okay,
Yeah, there's and everything is cinder block and concrete.
okay.
They do have concrete trucks here, but they don't usually use them because they're expensive to use. Usually they're all, the men will be out there mixing concrete with their shovels, and yeah, it's all cinder block and concrete. But yes, it is.
Okay.
It's available, definitely.
Okay.
I was in.
We actually have a big building place not far from where we live.
I remember being in Senegal, watching them out of my hotel window build a place. And I'm thinking that does not meet code in the US. And I was just like,
No, there's no ocean here.
they were just taking cinder block and putting it on top of each other. And I'm like, you need rebar. You need rebar.
Yeah, they do use rebar here.
Oh, so I mean, I think people, when we talk about, sometimes I'll be talking about the grocery store in Kenya or the grocery store here. We have this visual of Harris Teeter or something. No. Sometimes it's just a small little building.
Yes.
And it's dirt floors, but it meets the needs of that community. So
yeah.
you're putting it into context of,
It's almost like going back, it's almost like going back 100 years, when everybody didn't have 2 or 3 vehicles.
Sure.
And you did walk to the store, so there's like, even in our little small town, there's like 3 stores, where you can, because most people walk. Like here in Guatemala, it's totally opposite with the people that have vehicles than it is in the States. The amount of people in the States that don't have vehicles is probably how many have them here, and if they have one, it may be a motorcycle, it's just opposite and I'm talking about percentage wise, because Guatemala is very, very small, but most people do not have vehicles or transportation. And so the kids walk to the store, the little stores here, to get food to bring home to their parents. And a lot of times they go to the store every day because they only have enough for today, So, but there are, we do go to a grocery store called La Torre, and it is kind of like a Kroger or something, but it's like a quarter of the size. They do have some American brands and things like that. It's very, very small. They don't have near the choices that we would have in the States, not even near. Yeah.
I had an artisan come to the US from Haiti. And I believe he was somewhere in Georgia with a director, and she took him into Target, and it blew his mind. It just blew his mind.
We had one of our boys who lived in the village who was an American citizen because he was born in the US. And so he actually had an American passport. And his mom tried to get somebody to take him to the US because she said that she knew he was going to go one day, but she wanted him to be raised there so he didn't go when he was older and go crazy.
Yeah.
So actually a couple from our church took him back. And it was so awesome to see him go back because just everything was like, what is that? What is that? What is that? It's like they don't, it was like, how do you use this? What is this?
It's really sensory overload. I can't even imagine for you, but when I go out of the country and then I come back, everything is really loud. It's really bright. There's so much stuff happening because that's how we live and that's all we know. But when you go to another place, it just totally slows down and it's about building a relationship. It takes you a little bit when you come back to normalize. And I'm not sure that's a good thing, but you eventually get back into the groove where you're doing 20 things at one time. Yeah.
And that's one thing we hear here all the time. We have groups that come through our Canastas shop, all the time. And everyone says, we don't want to go. We don't want to go. And I think it's because of that. I think we're all, as Christians, we're here in one spirit, working together to accomplish one thing that is going to bless somebody else. And we are always more blessed than we could ever imagine. And I think nobody wants to go back to the madness, of the United States. And it's just really, it's a nice I love living here. I love the simplicity of it. You know, I
Well,
just,
how long did it take you to get used to it though?
oh,
Because I'm going to tell you, when I go, sometimes I'm like, I need internet. I need internet. You know, and I'm just like,
I mean, you know,
what is going on?
I am definitely a background person. Like I'm fine with the background. You know, I don't post a lot. I'm not, I just, I like being in the background, and that's okay with me. So that part of it really didn't, affect me. But leaving my family was definitely the hardest. And the first 6 months was just, I mean, I went through a tremendous spiritual battle in the first 6 months, and just feeling so, you're here, you have all these plans, you want to, my heart in the United States was Bible study with women. I love women's Bible study. Women's Bible study changed my life in such a profound way. And I wanted to do that here. I wanted, when you can't speak the language, you can't order food at the Burger King, you can't, that was very, very, it's like, God, what do you want me to do here? Like, what good am I, And there's still times, because I have had trouble learning the language. I can speak it a lot better than I used to, for sure, and can definitely carry on a conversation, but I can't have that profound conversation that I want to have. But my husband, on the other hand, God made him for Guatemala. I mean, when God told me that day, you're the one keeping him, it only took me a little while to realize that God made Chris, for Guatemala. And he is, I love to sit back and just watch him go, because he does such an amazing job, and he has such great, I mean, I have great relationships, but he just can be a little bit deeper. He can talk a little bit deeper, and he'll translate for me. And, so it's just, that part of it has always been hard, but you know what? God has been so faithful, and I just have to trust his plan for me. And, sometimes my plan is, I just have to realize, is Sueno Canastas and being my husband's support, being my husband's wife. And that's not, I've always been a very independent person. I was the director of surgical services. I ran my own, cardiac and pulmonary. So, but God has just used that to just teach me that what he's called me to do is important, and whether I think it's important or not, it is. And it's been that part has been the hardest for me, because I want to do great things. And Chris always says, Paula, you grew Sueno Canastas. I mean, you have this business, and, but I know it, but that's always, it's like, you never feel like you do enough. You never feel like, last night we had youth service here at our home, and we had 3 people saved, and, but, which is wonderful. We're so excited about that. So God has his plan, even, in our difficulties. We just have to trust him and walk in that. But as far as the internet and, stuff like that, we're usually pretty good with that. The internet's pretty good here. That kind of stuff, the simple life doesn't bother me. The only thing that bothers me is when I can't take a shower, or the water is really cold. But I just tell myself to get over it, and, but anyway, but it's a blessing. I mean, it is, we are blessed every single day to be able to do what we do. And when we see lives changed, and, hearts changed for the glory of God, and the kingdom growing, it all makes the sacrifice worth it.
I have another question. Can you talk some more about just the culture there as far as faith is concerned? Like, did people already know about God and believe in God, or they have no concept of like faith, or what is it like there?
Most people, I mean, like, this is a very Catholic country. Most people have heard about God, because Catholicism is all through the country. So have people heard about Jesus? Sure. But I think it's just like in the States, people have heard about Jesus, but they don't necessarily believe. So, and you're talking about a culture too, where the only thing that you would do at night is go to church. Like we had our church in the village, and it was a Baptist church. We had a Baptist pastor. They would have church like 4 or 5 times a week. And, you know, the families would come to church 4 or 5 times a week. But when you ask them, like we have youth service every Friday night here at our house, and we have about 43, 45 kids. But when you ask them, are you a Christian? Maybe 15 raise their hand. So they come to church, but they're not all Christians. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, and then of course, it's just like in the States, you have people that don't go to church, and we have different denominations here, like in Airtown, we have a Catholic church, we have a non-denominational church, we have a Baptist church, we actually have 2, and like in the next village over, we have another non-denominational. In Air Village, we have a Pentecostal church that is very popular. So people go to church. That's a lot of, and I think it's kind of like we used to be. I mean, that was kind of your social, that's where you go to be social. It's a lot different in the United States now, but I hope I answered your question okay. Did I? Okay. It's also it can be a very religious and legalistic. You know, the churches can be very legalistic. And we've worked hard to try to break some of those chains, especially for our kids. Like you can't listen to Christian rock music. That would be looked down upon. And, you know, we have tried to teach them it's more about the words, not about the sound of the music. You know, you got to listen to your words. What is it biblical? Is it, you know, because they love that music, you know, and so.
Any other questions?
I guess my question, you already kind of answered it. I was going to ask about language. Many of the Guatemalan people that I know who live in the States now, Spanish is not their first language, that they have maybe 1 or 2 other languages from indigenous languages that they know. I didn't know where you are in Guatemala, if Spanish is the predominant language or if there's another language that you had to learn as well when you lived there.
No, Spanish is the predominant language where we are right now. There are areas that speak another, the Mayan community that speaks, what is the name of it? The language? Kimchi?
No.
No. Oh, no, it's something. Huh?
Pechi?
Yeah,
Quiche. Yeah, that's it. Hey, me and my southern accent are very good with Spanish pronunciation. And I love my kids because they try so hard. I have certain kids, like especially in the canasta shop, that just they laugh, but they understand because I say it in the same voice, the same accent every time. But yeah, but no, Spanish is predominant here for sure. In area. I mean, you go 2 hours down the road and you're going to have a lot of the Mayans. But there's a lot of different dialects. It's funny, my husband, when we go to Guatemala City and my husband's speaking to people in Guatemala City, they'll say to him, "You're from Zacapa," you know, because he has like you would say to somebody, "You're from Alabama," you know, because there's a different accent, there's a different dialects. But yeah, it's mostly Spanish, and most of our kids do not know English. They're learning. We have 1 or 2 that really, but you have to put a lot into learning English if you really want to speak it fluently, especially in an area like this. We have some friends that live in Guatemala City, and he went to an English speaking school. So his whole education was English speaking. So he speaks English better than he speaks Spanish. So it just depends on where you're from, the money that your parents have, and any other questions?
So in the villages are like when you first got there, the parents that were working, was it all kind of like manual labor type jobs, or like what kind of, I mean, like what was available then versus what's available now as far as jobs go?
So it's very hard for women, especially, to find jobs here. They could do, clean house, but men, because of Hope Alive, and Hope Alive has been a huge blessing to this area because they employ so many people with construction. They employ women to clean the orphanage, clean the hospital, so that has been, but when we first went there, it was a lot of women. When we first, in 2010, it was mostly single mothers with their children. It has now, most of these women have married since then. You're talking 13 years later. So most of them do have husbands, but then it was mostly single moms with their children. And so they were at home taking care of their children. And, sometimes, Catalina, the one that Luvia, who works with us, whose dad promised her to a sex trafficker, she has 7 kids. And she is a single mom. And little kids, we're talking 2 and up. Now they're not, now they're older, but so that was very hard because they could not, and that was one of the reasons why we built the daycare, because we wanted the moms, to be able to go to work and provide without leaving their kids at home, with the neighbors and a lot of times, and this is the other thing, a lot of times they were having their older kids stay home from school to keep the kids so that they could go to work. But then that kept the older kids from getting their education. So that was some of the stuff that we just had to work through. Like, how can we help? How do we come in and help, to give them what they need so that they can get ahead? And we knew that the commitment to education was going to be the most important thing that we did, but that takes a long time. Takes a long time to educate a child. But now we see Veronica has a job. She's working. She's going to university. Our kids that graduated last year, 3 or 4 of them have jobs and they're going to university. And the families are already doing better. And, like we used to have families ask us for food all the time. Like now we only have a few, and they're the ones that are single moms who have very, very young kids who make tortillas, like they make tortillas and sell them. So that's the kind, like selling tortillas for women, especially uneducated women, cleaning houses, and they make very, very little. I mean, you're talking maybe $30 a week. If that, but once they got married, most of the men can work in construction, which is definitely the main job for men around in this area. My husband just showed me a little thing that said there's 21 Mayan languages here. And I don't know one of them.
Quiche is one.
Quiche.
Cachi is one.
Kimchi.
But kimchi.
Oh.
This is my husband.
Hello. Okay, any more questions? I know we ran over our time.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, you're good. You're good. You're good. So I want to just thank you, Paula, for taking time to explain your ministry and the heart behind it. Wanted to, guys, as my special thank you, wanted to give you guys a discount on all of their products, 15% off from now until Tuesday at 11:59. I know I have some people skidding in at 11:50 on Tuesday night. I'm not gonna name names. But your code when you're checking out is Dream Basket, all one word. So I will be sending out an email with that later on today, along with the recording of this, as long as we don't sound like Minnie Mouse. Next one, I don't have one planned for the rest of April, because I'm doing a little special thing that you're going to find out about on the next newsletter coming out on Saturday. So be sure to look for that. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to spend with us this morning. And I hope you have left with a greater understanding of it's more than just a basket.
Amen.
Yeah. So thanks, guys, for being a part of our Zoom.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm so sorry that you didn't get to see. And I hope, Marissa, that maybe we could come on another Saturday, or and I can give you guys a tour of our shop and show you everyone that's working there and introduce you to all our artisans. And I'm sorry for the misunderstanding.
That's okay. Oh, just so everybody knows, Paula had to fly back to Virginia last month, sell her house, move everything out of her house, and then go back. So yeah, it's been a little bit of an adventure for her. So I get it. I get it. You lose your mind a little bit when you're moving. So
I feel so bad, but I love telling the story of our ministry, and I'm glad that you guys got to hear about it, because I hope when you do meet the artisans and what God has done, it'll give you a better understanding of how great our God is. And I hope we'll be able to get that done sometime, Marissa. If you can schedule me in, I'll be happy to organize it on my end.
I can do that. Well, everyone have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see you on Instagram.
Bye.
Bye.